Okay, tracking shot, monkey cam. So the way I see this topic is the occult is applied in a very broad way. It could be anything that's out of the ordinary from basic religions and involving the practices and ceremonies of communicating with a more powerful being, but not through the general avenues, accepted avenues of society. What do you guys think?
The occult, well, so etymologically, it means hidden. So yeah, what you say about it being outside of the established channels, I think is absolutely true. It comes from the efforts of sort of the underclass of the spiritual hierarchy, I guess. You have to be a kind of
Oh, nice turn of phrase. Essentially, the occult is the study of what is hidden, with a few modifiers tacked onto that. Sounds like we don't need to be overly scrupulous in policing the borders.
Okay, so I'm going to start with Scriabin, which is, I sought this record out when I was looking for music that was satanic, right? And this one came up, and then I found it. Now I know more about it. It's a Russian eccentric composer from 1900s, and he composed the Sixth Sonata, which is not included here, as considering himself as Satan's servant. But he never played the sonata in public, and I couldn't find a recording of it. He basically he scared himself by embracing evil, and he called the Sixth Sonata nightmarish, noxious, unclean, and pretty much shelved it. And then in response to that, he created the White Mass, which is depicted here, his Seventh Sonata. And that sort of cleansed the air, and it was very popular. It's a very popular title, and also being performed widely. And then 2 years later, he worked up the gumption to create the Black Mass, which is the Ninth Sonata, and depicted here, which he describes as a nightmarish march of Gothic visions, ghosts, and distorted horrors. So he was very into theosophy, and he was pursuing the darker, the sinister, and considered him a disciple of Satan, and performed it widely. He was very proud of it. So that's Scriabin, Night Sonata, Black Mass specifically. It's basically lumped into being an impressionist like Debussy. So didn't really fit in, crazy Russian. Okay, so this is probably, these are in no particular order. This is probably the most occultish of the group. I don't quite understand the immediate communication that we get here. Hathor is an Egyptian god, a sky goddess, a female sky goddess, sometimes depicted as a cow. We have the sky goddess in Hathor, and we have Chai, a representative of life. So this is another Russian, Igor Wakovich. And he did this in his third album from 1973. It's basically a space opera, and it's built around primitive synthesizers and voices, and lots of spoken word. And there's a couple songs on here that stand out. Earth Spirit, War Ritual, and they are all ritualistic. Cries from the Hellish Sabbath, full incantations with voices and crying. The crying is really disturbing, by the way. Office of the Lifting of Bodies, which is a funeral chant in Latin. So parts of this are based on the Kabbalah, Jewish mysticism, and magic and alchemy. And famously, Michael Gira of the Swans proclaimed Wakovich one of the strangest artists he'd ever heard. So And last I have, this is certainly creepy and overshadowed by creepiness of the movie itself. Rosemary's Baby from 1968. It's based around the theme, the lullaby, which reoccurs throughout the soundtrack. And some of these, there's a lot of contrast. Some of these are light and optimistic. Some of these versions of the lullaby, and others are creepy and fearful. So dark piano with this lightly synced harpsichord, while Mia Farrow is half singing over the top. There's also a couple standout tunes here. The Coven is improv jazz, which adds to the contrasting moods and textures in the narrative. And composing one, which really stood out to me, really pulled me in because it consists of this very light piano melody accompanied by an almost invisible breathy whistling. As they say, "Hail Satan, hail Rosemary." That's my three.
Hey, so I'm going to begin where it only seems right to begin, with Black Sabbath's first album. So Sabbath were not actually occultists. Geezer Butler, their bassist, wrote most of their lyrics, and to this day, I think he's a reasonably observant Christian. But they certainly dealt in some occult looking things, and they named themselves Black Sabbath. And the title song on this very first album, named Black Sabbath, uses the so-called tritone, or the devil's interval, the flattened fifth, which everybody makes a big deal of as being, sort of like an evil an evil collection of chords, dating back to the Renaissance. And supposedly, the church banned the use of it or whatever. I have the impression that that's not really true, kind of an apocryphal story, but it's a great story and seems like a good place to start. And it does sound pretty evil, those first three notes of the song Black Sabbath. It sounds dark and heavy and kind of evil. Next, Coven. I don't know where they were from. They were American, but beyond that, I don't recall where they're from. But this came out in like 67 or 68 or something like that. You see on the back, they really leaned into the whole like Black Mass thing. In fact, they had a song called Black Mass. It was this long ass, like last song on the second side. It was like a fake Black Mass. It wasn't really music. It was, a reenactment of a supposed Black Mass. All super hokey, but they had a lot of good songs. They were kind of folky, really. And the singer, her name was maybe Jinx Dawson, something like that. She actually sounded a lot like Grace Slick. It's a good album overall. Blue Oyster Cult. These guys were not occultists either, but they're lyricists. He created this sort of culty world that most of their songs inhabited. I can't tell you much about it, but it's pretty consistent from album to album throughout, I don't know, the early years of their career. And they're just a great band. Coil. These guys were apparently legit occultists, skipping from hard rock to electronica. I don't know the details of it. I don't know. Maybe you do, Eric?
It would be Peter Sleazy Christofferson,
Yep.
member of Throb and Gristle.
And then John Balance, I think,
right,
is the other guy, right?
Yeah, and they like to they like creepy themes and weird sexual practices.
Yeah, I think that they recorded in an actual like torture chamber or like an ancient dungeon or something like that. Am I right about that?
Yeah, I think they were fond of seeking out locations that would sort of amplify psychic energy, as they put it, or something.
Yeah, yeah, but definitely a lot of arcane stuff going on, and they put out a lot of great music too. Um, and then finally, almost a modern counterpoint to that Coven record is Lucifer. It's led by this woman here, Johanna. They started out kind of a doom band, and then they sort of morphed into a 70s style hard rock band. Great live show. Um, Interestingly, they actually toured with Coven. Coven opened for them. I saw them opening, Coven opening for Lucifer last fall in Berkeley. But yeah, they essentially sound like a hard rock band, fronted by Stevie Nicks maybe or something like that. But I guess she has an actual background in the occult. She worked in an occult bookstore, and she's German. So what do you got, Eric?
All right. Well, I have picked 3 records somewhat at random from what I think is a fairly extensive collection of uh, occult themed records. The first one is perhaps the most obvious choice, but well
Good
worth knowing
record.
about. It is Black Widow Sacrifice, and just check out some of the titles here. Uh, Come to the Sabbath,
Hmm.
Conjuration, Attack of the Demon, Seduction. So all of this is very much oriented in the sort of practical objectives of sort of swaying the spirit world to do your bidding. And well, something like Attack of the Demon shows you that what happens when you mess with things that you don't understand, I suppose. Um, but the record, which is kind of groovy, early 70s folk rock, uh, with a sort of sinister bent to it. Well, that's the music, and there's a visual component to delight the eyes and senses while one is on
Whoa.
journey, on the astral plane here. They just pile it on pretty thick, Adonai and Babylon, Etruscans and Egyptians. They came to my temple, journeyed to the valley of the moon, all that stuff. So the clavicule of Solomon, secret arts, the talisman of Set. I mean, it really is like they're rifling through the shelves at that occult bookstore, trying to
Just
come up
looking for cool song titles.
looking for cool lyrics and song titles. Yeah. Oh, and I think I failed to mention that it does actually have something like a mise en scène of a Sabbath. So there's a sort of an attempt to sort of conjure up the witchy forces that is really worth everyone's attention. All right, that's item number 1. Item number 2, we're going to a different part of the world here, away from old Blighty, and to the sunny tropics, where magical forces abound. Here's Exhuma. Exhuma, it took his name after, I guess, his place of origin in the Bahamas, although it also sounds like, to exhume. And there are songs on here, fittingly enough, about zombies and I see fire in the dead man's eye and stuff like that. So this is, again, a sort of folky record, but there's all kinds of really weird voices, sort of little high pitched chatterings and low rumblings. Um, and well, again, just to show the occult leaning of it, I'll quote some lyrics. Beyond the universe, a star that once lit Mars, riding the wind, kissing the sand. Walk in the night with me, Hooga Man. Well, you know what? This is getting into I don't even know what a Hooga Man is, but there are all kinds of men, women, and spirits that are invoked here that belong to some kind of Caribbean lore of is this basically a record that comes out of the world of Santeria and voodoo, to use the crudest approximation. Yeah. Exuma styles himself as the Obeah man, so he's a bit like Dr. John in that he takes on this persona of being a spirit guide, who will perform services for you, and one song is a seance set to music. So Exuma's got several records. The first two in particular are really good. This is the first of them all, and that gets my recommendation. Then finally, sort of the least and most occult of them all, because this is somebody who I think actually was convinced that he had a personal relationship with the spirit world. Rocky Erickson.
Oh, I was waiting for that.
Nice.
So the evil one, and I think he gets all of his occult visions from horror movies, probably.
Or
But
comic books even.
and comic books, yeah. But there's an intensity here. This is pretty straightforward rock, but it's really somebody who is gripped by infernal powers fairly regularly. So we've got Don't Shake Me, Lucifer. Cold Night for Alligators is maybe not really that relevant, but Stand for the Fire Demon certainly is. I think of demons, lots of demons. The Creature with the Atom Brain, uh, and Bloody Hammer. So we have this evocation of a whole world of mystery and horror and fright. And Rocky Erickson actually was the frontman for the 13th floor elevators, which actually shows that's a little occult nod right there. In as much as people are superstitious about the 13th floor or about the number 13 in general, but he wound up in a psychiatric institution against his will after taking a lot of acid and never really recovered. So he's yeah, one of the original pioneers of psychedelic music in the 60s, and he died only a few years ago. But he never really fully recovered from precisely the kind of thing he chronicles here. So the evil one, that he really his mental illness really could be mistaken for something like a spirit journey. So that would be my third record.